What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. So today we're back yet again with my absolute favorite series to make on YouTube. I have to admit, it's another compilation of a list of some awesome, the coolest, the craziest, and the best scrapped abilities that just never made it into League of Legends. And I always really enjoy making these videos since, even if the abilities didn't make it onto the kits of actual release champions, Riot really does have a habit of, iceboxing cool ability concepts to test them out on different characters, even if they don't end up working out the first time around. I mean, just a hint, Ivern's W actually was originally tested as a design for Caitlyn 5 years earlier, and there's tons of abilities like that, and I love seeing these kind of things. So with that in mind, you always get the chance to try and guess where the cool abilities we talk about in these kind of videos might end up in the future. Either way, let's jump right into it, and if you guys enjoyed the video, definitely hit that like button, because if this video hits 5,000 likes, I'm buying myself a pizza. Let's get started. So first up, we have an ability that was tested as one of the original versions of Jinx's minigun. So Riot Groovy Lord, as he's calling himself now, he used to be Riot Gypsy Lord, he changed his name actually. Anyway, he said that the initial idea for the minigun was that instead of firing single basic attacks, what the ability would do is that it would just constantly unleash this, constant stream of bullets the entire time that you were in the minigun position, kind of like a real minigun would almost. It was a super cool concept, but it actually had a lot of problems because last hitting with it was just super broken, and it also wasn't entirely clear where you were attacking since the bullets were constant and ended up kind of just being skill shots essentially. So they fixed it while maintaining a bit of the minigun sort of feel by making it like really fast with a ramp up time so that it gets faster, the more time you fire it. It's not perfect, but it does feel close enough to work, and it definitely feels like a minigun, and it did fix the issues that Riot had during its design. They actually found a pretty elegant solution with this, to be honest. I mean, a minigun that just keeps firing would be honestly not really that fair for basic attacks, although maybe they might be able to make it work on a different ability one day in the future. Next up, we're taking a look at an ability that was one of the original designs for Kled's ultimate, which comes from Kled's designer, Riot Hero. So during the early development phases of Kled, one of his original ultimates was an ability that would cause Skarl to throw Kled, so to throw yourself essentially at an enemy champion. Kled, you would then latch onto that champion and hit them, a bunch of times over a few seconds for just a ton of damage. And then during the time that Kled was latched onto the enemy champion, you as the player would actually control the Kled-less Skarl, and you would like run around and stuff, and you'd have to get close to the enemy that Kled was latched onto so that you could catch him when he jumped off the target. So this ability was described as being just absolutely hilarious and extremely fun to play with, and it honestly sounds just kind of ridiculous and awesome, but it actually ended up not working so well thematically, and the single target attack focus as well resulted in Kled as a champion not really accomplishing that sort of, cavalry kind of feel, like leading the charge that they were kind of going for. Another cool Jinx ability we found out about from Riot Groovy Lord is kind of similar to the first ability that we talked about in this video, in the sense that we didn't really get a chance to talk about them in the more in-depth Jinx video we made a few months ago. Anyway, it was a design for one of the earlier versions of her original ultimate. So essentially what she used to do was she would shoot out a rocket, kind of like her current ultimate, but instead of being like this one massive straight line nuke, what it would actually do is that it would just split into 10 mini rockets that would then globally seek out and attack and damage enemy champions on the map. So every enemy champion would suddenly have, 2 mini homing Jinx rockets locked onto them, letting Jinx burst pretty much everyone like Karthus would with his ultimate almost. It actually ended up getting scrapped after playtesting because for 3 playtests in a row, it accidentally killed the enemy jungler at his red buff, while Jinx was just trying to win a 2v2 fight in the bot lane. It turns out hard to avoid global damage that you just don't have to channel for is actually pretty darn broken. It's way too strong as a global ability for sure, but homing missiles is potentially a really cool idea that maybe Riot will play again with in the future. I know they tested some homing missile designs for Lucian, as well as some other AD carries too, so this kind of ability is something that we could maybe see come to life in the future, possibly. Maybe not making them totally impossible to dodge, but giving them kind of like a soft lock-on almost, like a heat-seeking missile, so that maybe some clever movement juke or like a well-timed flash could maybe dodge the ability or something like that. Next up, we're taking a look at an ultimate for Zilean that was actually tested for his rework that took place around Season 4. So we found out about this ability from one of Riot Zephyrus' streams, so it's not exactly like a direct quote or, concept, but apparently Riot tried a spell where Zilean had like this small Amumu ultimate, but instead of rooting everyone, it actually spun everything around the ability in 3 chunks, as a form of crowd control actually. So it would pretty much just catch all the enemies that were locked inside of it and kind of just like spin them around in groups. It actually sounds pretty cool, to be honest. I mean, you could probably use it to lock down, maybe relocate enemies so that your team could pile onto them or something, which is pretty sweet. Still though, it's pretty difficult to beat Rewinding Death, especially thematically when you consider Zilean's sort of character and personality, and it's honestly such an iconic part of Zilean that his ultimate is something that they definitely just couldn't remove in his rework. Next up, we're taking a look at an ability from Syndra, which we heard about from Riot Meddler. Now, Syndra was always kind of going to be about manipulating her magical spheres, and some of the versions of Syndra's abilities actually were a lot more powerful, but consumed the spheres on use. So the most awesome ability that Syndra ended up getting with this sort of concept was like this giant nova effect ability that essentially worked like this insanely powerful skill shot that was really slow moving. Maybe a little bit of like a Vagar meteor almost, but like a line-based skill shot instead. Like a line of Vagar meteors almost. So if it hit anyone, it would just completely wreck them and deal ridiculous damage, but it actually would have been pretty easy to avoid for mobile heroes or really just anyone that wasn't right next to Syndra or crowd controlled. It's actually pretty interesting that Riot decided to get rid of that skill shot to give Syndra like a targeted nuke for her ultimate instead, but it's probably something to do with the fact that the rest of her kit is actually pretty complex, so I guess they just didn't really want to go over the top. Next up, we have a design for an ability that was originally intended to be on Orianna, who is actually a champion that was designed pretty backwards compared to most champions and how they're designed these days. Usually Riot focuses on coming up with like a cool character concept, like a role for that character, and then they design a kit that would kind of work well around them. Orianna was actually done the opposite way. So what they did was they actually started by taking Sivir's Q and essentially breaking it down into 3 parts, like 3 different ways to control it. So the basic abilities essentially. And once they had the kit, they then figured out how to theme it and came up with the idea for Orianna and her Clockwork Ball. So the scrapped ability we wanted to mention though was one version of her ultimate. Once they had her basic abilities, they really had a tough time figuring out what kind of ultimate to put on Orianna. And it definitely went through a ton of different versions and was really difficult for Riot to figure out with their design. So they tried one version where her ball actually became this small area of effect crowd control shock aura kind of. Maybe like a mix between Victor's ultimate and Victor's W. So instead of like the shockwave that she has now, she'd control this shock orb that would crowd control as well as damaging people nearby it consistently. A lot less of a playmaking ability compared to her current shockwave for sure. Honestly though, shockwave is a pretty awesomely designed ability, so I do have to admit that I'm happy Riot settled for that one instead. Now definitely the most broken ability on our list is something that was originally intended for the design of Callista. So it was a cancelled version of her W ability actually, and it kind of started out similar to the same way that her current W does now. She would activate the W to send out a spirit that could detect enemy players. The difference was that in this version of the W was that if the ghost kind of spirity thing actually detected an opponent, Callista could reactivate her W to teleport to the spirit if it found someone. Now that's actually really insane, but it gets even more crazy honestly. It actually brought her soulbound support with her. So this ability actually got to the stage of being tested before Riot realized how insane that actually was. And after that first playtest, it just took one playtest, it was completely scrapped. If it only teleported Callista, maybe it would be a little bit more balanced since it doesn't guarantee a 2v1 fight. I mean, maybe we'll see a different version of this ability in the future that's like way toned down. I mean, the idea of like marking a target or a part of the map and then just teleporting to them actually could make for like a really cool assassin ability, potentially, I guess. But honestly, it's just so broken that I have to admit I'm pretty happy this version didn't make it into the game. And last up, we've got some bonus information about a canceled champion that some of you guys might have known about, which was a guy that goes by the name of Omen. And it's actually information that has never been shared with the public before, so I'm very excited to bring this one because it's coming straight from the designer himself, Riot Feral Pony, who of course kindly gave me the permission to share some of my DMs with you guys that I had with him, some of our private conversations. And I definitely do want to say that, don't share DMs without permission, so I'm very glad that he was able to give me permission to share this stuff. So we've talked about Omen a lot in past videos, and after I made those videos, actually, Feral Pony reached out to me just like sharing some information and stuff. And it turns out that although a lot of different forms of Omen were discussed back in the day, the only actual playable version that they tested in Omen's design about 6 years ago was his design as like a spine shooting sort of marksman character. His gameplay was kind of like a mix of stacking his spines on a target, kind of like Callista's Rend, I guess, but also throwing clusters of spines, and that his other abilities could actually detonate. So you'd throw spines on someone and then you could just blow them up, it is pretty much just Callista's Rend, let's be honest here. So maybe Callista actually got that ability from Omen. In terms of gameplay, it was actually probably pretty similar to Gangplank's new playstyle with his barrels, his post-rework playstyle, although Gangplank's design wasn't inspired by it, at least that's what Feral Pony said. It also turns out the reason that Omen ended up being scrapped is that his art and model specifically just didn't work in the game. It kind of just looked super derpy and out of place. I mean, if you want more information on Omen, you can check out the other video that we took a look at him. At least Riot managed to kind of make a champion that was pretty similar with Rek'Sai. I mean, she's a pretty awesome character, and I think Rek'Sai is a great take on the sort of Omen caricature, I guess you could say. Either way though, that's just about going to wrap up our list for some of the coolest and craziest scrapped abilities that just didn't make it into League of Legends. As always, I want to give a huge shout out to the Rioters who helped make these videos possible, especially Riot Feral Pony, who we've actually gotten the chance to talk to directly for some really awesome exclusive info actually. The information from the DMs with him is something that I'm pretty confident has never been released to the public before, so I'm pretty excited about that one, as well as of course a big shout out to Riot Groovy Lord. As always, he's a great friend of this channel, and just the Rioters in general. Honestly, I gotta admit, I'm a big fanboy of the Riot designers, so I'm just really happy that I get the chance to talk to them and make videos about their stuff. As always, if you guys have any sweet ideas on champions that maybe these scrapped abilities would work on, definitely let us know in the comments section below. And either way, it looks like that's gonna be it for me. If you guys enjoyed the video, definitely drop a like, subscribe if you want. Thank you so much for watching if you made it all the way to the end. And of course, as always, I'll see you guys next time.